Hello, my fellow introverts. Stacy here, your programming and test automation expert. As you can see, today we have a rather different setting, and I decided to take you on a walk, show you a little bit of Poznań, the city that I live, and make some conclusions about my previous experience in different projects and companies. Please give this video a like if you are enjoying this, and let's see if this format is going to suit you. So without any further ado, let's start. So we're going to talk about cross-functional teams today. So before we start making some conclusions and speaking about this, I need to tell you a bit more about my experience. So I started to work as a test automation trainee around 12 years ago. Back then, I worked just as a test automation engineer with Python, and we had a pretty straightforward approach. So we had a dedicated team for testing. So developers were sending us some tickets to verify, so the usual flow. But after a while, after a couple of years, I joined a very interesting team where two traumatic experiences were waiting for me. So first of them was I had to now work with JavaScript. After Python, this was a pretty traumatic experience, whereas I use JavaScript right now and I really like it. But back then it was a pretty hard challenge for me to switch from Python to JavaScript. Second experience, and most important one for this topic, was that this was a fully cross-functional team. And not in the way that you have different roles in the team, but you actually, the developers are doing testing, the testers are doing development as well. So basically, this was a bit unusual for me, and I guess for the most of the newcomers to this team. And for me, the most traumatic thing, of course, was that I had to start to do some development. And basically, I've collected some interesting observations about this learning of being a developer. But we will switch back to this in a moment. After some time, I became a team leader, not in this team, in another one. So after that, I moved back to testing, to test automation. And after some time, I decided that actually I want to be a full-stack developer. But nowadays, I still do a lot of test automation, like functional tests, not actually the unit testing, but which I do, of course, as well. But I'm usually making some development, plus I'm doing some end-to-end tests as well. So here you have my background. Let's talk a little bit more about the conclusions that I've made being a tester, a developer, and switching these roles. Slow. This was my first impression when I started to write some development code. It wasn't because I didn't know JavaScript, but it was partially because I was overcomplicating everything that I'm doing. Being a tester, you're thinking about a lot of corner cases, usually. So let's see an example. You have to implement a login. So you have two input fields, like one for the login, the second one for the password. And we have an OK button or just login button, which will allow you to send the information to the server, and then you will react whether it was OK or not. We're not talking about some negative cases, we're just talking about very basic user story just to implement the login itself. So if a normal developer with an experience approaches this user story, they would probably add those two input fields, add some basic validation, remove some spaces, some white spaces, and they will just send the information to the server without any additional stuff. When you are a QA, you start to add some corner cases right away, without even thinking that it's going to prolong the time of implementation of this user story. You just do it this way. So I was struggling quite a lot with myself just to stop and, assuming that there might be some bugs, there might be some issues with what I have implemented, I have to just let it go, and we'll see. The testers are, not the testers, but in this particular team, the developers are going to help to verify this story and see whether it's okay or not. So if you are starting your journey as a developer and you have been a tester previously, don't fall into this hole and know that you're going to have an intention to do so, but actually this is not a very good idea. If you have such situation, if you see some corner cases, it's much better to try and convince your product owner to finish this in another user story. Okay guys, so now let's talk about how doing some development is going to help you do your testing better. Let's imagine that we have a to-do application. You can save some items into this to-do, and basically you can then retrieve them when they were added. So let's imagine that we have two bugs. One of them is basically you have a 404 when you're trying to request an existing item from those to-do items, and you're requesting for this particular item, like by ID or something like that. The second bug is related to having a 404, but only when you are getting all of the items from this to-do list, and you have at least one item in the database. So the question to you is, what is the root cause? Is it the same root cause? So there is a huge try except block where you are handling any error, and it's always raising 404 for you. Just always, even if there is a 500 server error. And then when you're trying to get an item by ID, the ID is actually a number. And once you're getting a number, you are forgetting, in the code of course, you're forgetting to cast it to integer, and this is why you are getting a 500 basically on the server, but you would never know that because you have a try except block which is handling and giving you a 404. And another situation is the second bug, where you are retrieving all of the items, and in that case we're just communicating with the database in the wrong way. So as you can see, when you start looking at the code and trying to understand what is the root cause, and I want to highlight this, being like doing testing activities, you're actually going to the code and trying to find it. So you will find a whole lot more of bugs than you would have when you were testing just in a black box. So a hint for you guys, if you are doing some testing, it's a very useful thing to go to the code, take a look what is happening there, and you will find much more bugs while doing so. Of course, you have to be a bit careful about this, because if you are looking into the same code that you have already implemented, then it's probably not right, because in this case you are going to assume that something works this way but not another way. So if you want to try this stuff, then just talk to your developers and try to agree that if somebody implemented this code, then they just shouldn't test it. So let's move for the next one. Basically, there are multiple cases when you want to use different data for a single test case. There's going to be a code example here, and you have 10 seconds to understand what is wrong. Okay, I hope you've guessed it. So if we execute this code, then if, for example, the second set of data will fail, then we will not go further. We will just stop there and we will not verify other cases. So in order to fix that, you have to use some tools for data-driven testing. So basically you would inject the data from somewhere, and then it will make sure that you have so many test cases as the amounts of data that you are injecting into those test cases, and this way you will fix this issue. So this is another example of where developers might fail, so be cautious about this. The next one, mocking. Imagine writing end-to-end tests. You have to behave as a user, you have to do, well, actually black box testing, and the developers are responsible for this. And at some point you have already implemented a lot of tests and you want to run them on Jenkins. And you start running it, and at some point you see that they're quite slow. So what would be a tester's decision to fix it? Well, probably the tester will take a look at the test, see whether there are some timeouts or there is some waiting for something, and they would try to fix it this way. But for me, it happened that the developers, they just say, okay, the response from the server is taking too long, so why shouldn't we mock it? Let's mock the server. Just let's mock the server and just see whether it's going to work well or not, if it's going to be faster. Well, so idea, right? Let me put it straight. So in some situations, when you want to use record and playback, and basically you're recording the responses from server and you're doing it periodically, you can go this direction, but this is very risky because you might not spot some issues at some point. So basically wrong idea to do that, to mock anything for end-to-end tests. But if you don't have any other solution and you have to do this, like absolutely have to do this, then just be wary that it's going to be a bit hard to keep it up to date with the server. And be absolutely sure that you need it, and be absolutely sure that you're going to update those mocks. So let's make some positive conclusions. What does it bring us if we work together with developers and we're exchanging our roles? So first of all, you are more in context. Like both developers and testers, they exchange roles, they become more in context, they know what they are doing in both roles, and this gives you a better quality of product because you know what to test, you know what to develop, you know which bugs might await you. Also, developers start to think more about those corner cases the way that I did when I started my journey with the development. And this is a huge benefit as well, because usually they would just do something. I know myself, I started doing this at some point, but then I started writing some tests again and I started thinking more about the corner cases. So, another huge benefit is that when you have an external testing team, right? You're not in the same team, you're in a different team, and you're just receiving some requests from the developer to be able to test something, to verify something, to do some regressions. What is usually a problem? The management might forget that there is testing to be done. I don't know why this is happening, but sometimes they just forget. And then at some point, when the developers gave an estimate and they said, okay, this is going to be released in 2 months, at the very point when they said it's going to be released, suddenly the testing team is saying, okay, but we have to do some regression testing before giving it to production. So you get plus 2 weeks, let's say, for regression testing, for checking for some bugs, for reporting those bugs. So you get the idea. So basically the testing team is being in the shadow and nobody knows what exactly are they doing and how much effort it is going to be to release a product or do some other testing activity. It's just in the shadow, so you don't remember about this. So keeping developers in the flow and making them help with testing activities is going to ensure that the whole team is under management supervision. The management knows about everything that is happening, and it's very, very clear. So this is a very huge benefit, which you have to remember about. So let's talk about the positives of developers helping testers. So basically, the first thing is that you are more in context. So you both know, developers and testers, what you are doing. So developers are in context that testers are going to do this and this at this point, and the testers also know that developers are going to implement these features. So there are no surprises, I would say. Especially this is very good when we're talking about management of the projects. So for example, you want to release a project in 2 months, and the management knows about this because they had the estimations from the developers, and they said, okay, this is going to be done in 2 months, so it's fine, we don't have a lot of bugs, maybe there is going to be some bugs, so there is going to be 1 week of buffer, let's say. But it's often the way that the management doesn't think about testing. Unfortunately, I keep seeing this. I don't know how this could be happening nowadays, but this is actually happening. So the idea of having a cross-functional team is that basically when the developers are helping with testing, it's not kept in the shadows. So you have the testing activities planned together with development activities, and this way you know that, okay, release is not going to happen in 2 weeks, it's going to be actually a month until we release, because we have to do some regression, we have to do some extra testing like exploratory testing, some testing activities that are mandatory for the release. Other benefits, so basically the testing being done by developers is helping to understand the business more, which makes the product, first of all, less buggy, because they start thinking about corner cases, because they do some testing activities and they learn. And second thing is that the product is becoming more user-oriented. These are becoming not just the user stories, not just the tasks, but this is becoming more like a product that you are using because you are an end user. You're doing some end-to-end testing, this is why you're an end user. So this helps to change the perspective a little bit, and this is why you can use it and you can help the developers this way. So highly recommended, try it in your project, and you might not try it the whole thing like the way that we had, but you can try a little bits of this. So you can try to do some development if you're a tester, or you can do some testing if you're a developer, and see how it goes. After a while, after maybe a month or so, you will start seeing some differences. I hope the good ones. So I really hope you liked the video. Subscribe to our channel, give us a like if you liked it, and let us know in the comments what we can change with these videos, and in general, did you like the format? So I will see you next time.